Last year, Ridley Scott's Alien celebrated its 40th anniversary, and even though we're a year late, me and Dan did an episode all about Alien and how Sigourney Weaver is arguably the first definitive female lead. Now, another viewer discretion warning. This is an episode that deals with some pretty heavy topics, so go in with an open mind, go in with caution, and remember there are plenty of other Rip Ticket review episodes from our limited run also available here on the TheJackSmit YouTube channel. In the week where Christopher Nolan revealed his latest mind flip, UCLan students celebrated another year of hard work at their Students' Union Awards, and Zack Snyder finally got his way with Justice League. What else would you need from a movie podcast and two blokes talking about Ridley Scott's sci-fi masterpiece? Hello, wherever you are listening or watching, and welcome to the Rip Ticket Review, a movie podcast that apparently you can hear much better in space than a scream. I'm Jack Smith, and joining me over the power of the internet to discuss all things Alien is the Ripley to my Kane. Good afternoon, Dan Carver.
Good afternoon, Jack. And yes, we are talking about Alien, just the film Alien, not the franchise.
No.
But yeah, Alien, the 1979 science fiction horror film directed by Ridley Scott, and it's a masterpiece in my opinion. It was met with critical acclaim then, and it's met with critical acclaim now by anyone who watches it. It's so important that it was placed in the film archives in the United States National Film Registry. It was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, I would say all three, and it's been called one of the greatest films of all time. I mean, what more can we say about Alien apart from what hasn't already been we've not already said? And the focus on this episode is, of course, around the main character, Ripley. Ellen Ripley, yes, who was played by Sigourney Weaver. Rather interesting time to have a female protagonist in a very male-centric, dominated genre, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, back then, this was 2 years after Star Wars had come out, and we'd been introduced to the Princess Leia character. It was still very male-centric at the time, because Hollywood was in its old ways by then. This film quite literally changed the game.
Pretty much did so, and Ellen Ripley is one of my favourite female leads, one of my favourite female characters, because the whole of the Alien franchise, the whole of the Alien movie just revolves around her fighting against she doesn't even fight the alien, does she? She sort of like runs away from it and tries to outwit it. Essentially, this is not a very masculine sort of "I'm going to grab a gun and shoot this alien" film. In fact, we see that in the film, don't we? Where they try to hunt the alien down, only to find that they are themselves the ones that are being hunted.
Yeah.
Crikey, where do we even begin? There's so much to unpack.
I think it goes without saying, this podcast could get very uncomfortable for some of our viewers and listeners. So be warned, we may approach some pretty controversial topics. So err on the side of caution this week, folks. This could get very real very quickly.
Yeah, we're basically, the reason that we're going into that is because in order to discuss why Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, is the greatest female protagonist, we have to confront the truth about the what she's going up against, which is the alien. And the alien itself. Well, let's start with its design. The alien was designed by the Swiss artist H.R. Geiger, from concepts on his book Necronomicon. And H.R. Geiger was a surreal artist. He was very well known for combining phallic imagery with sort of horror images. And if you have a look at his works, you'll see what I mean. I mean, I think one of his big pieces of art was called Penis Envy.
Ooh.
And it's just loads of penises. Like it's weird. It's really weird. And to be fair, I have a lot of respect for the guy. It was his most distinctive stylistic sort of innovation is the representation of human bodies and machines in a very cold biomechanical relationship. And he's actually got some restaurants as well that were made in his honor. They're called geisha bars.
Wow.
Which is it's the two geisha bars are in Switzerland apparently. I'm going to butcher this now. In Gruyères. That's weird. But yeah, so there's that.
Yeah.
But yeah, H.R. Geiger designed the Alien. One thing that made now. A thing in your post you sort of like dropped upon this that Ridley Scott wanted to create Jaws in space.
Yeah, that's what he was originally pitched as. That was the literal pitch that he went to with Fox. Like, I want to make Jaws, but in space. That's all he gave them.
Yeah, which on its own sounds pretty a decent idea. What he ended up making, however, was a slasher movie in space. Because the idea, there are themes of sex and sexual violence in Alien. These are inescapable, and these are deliberate as well. There was a documentary called The Alien Saga. It was a TV documentary in 2002. Alien screenwriter Dan O'Bannon explained, and I quote, "I'm going to attack the audience. I'm going to attack them sexually." Which is a really, really weird thing to say. But that's what slasher movies do. They attack you sexually because, of course, slasher movies themselves are comments on the degradation of the social standards that they are made in. In fact, if you look at like the 80s sort of slasher movies where you had Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, the Jason series.
Basically anything that would go on to become known as a video nasty.
Pretty much. Each of these would feature different different protagonists, that's the wrong word, victims, I would say. Yes. The protagonist would always be a woman who was 99 times out of 100 a virgin. She was clean cut, didn't do drugs, didn't do any of this, whereas the rest of her friends were slightly less so. There's an old sort of meme that if you have sex in a slasher movie, you're the first to die. Because, of course, premarital sex is wrong in the 80s. And apparently a way of getting that message across was to create a slasher film which butchered people. And here's an interesting thing. To this very day, slasher movies are still about the declining standards of morality in the day they were made. I mean, look at Unfriended.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? I was watching that, and I was watching Unfriended in the cinema, and I was like, my God, how much hatred does this director have for people?
I seem to remember when Unfriended came out, the team at the local cinema were discussing it quite in depth in the staff room afterwards, and they were trying to convince me to see it. But I said, guys, I don't have the time. I don't want to commit myself to watching a film about social media, which I use a lot.
Yeah. I loved what Unfriended tried to do. I honestly, it was stout. It was stout to get the 15 certificate.
Oh, yeah.
It does my nuts in when directors do that. Stop wussing out. 15-year-olds shouldn't be watching movies about people dying. That's for 18-year-olds and up.
Stop wussing out, read the guidelines and make good 18 certificate movies again.
I know. Anyway, so slasher movies, where does this fit into Alien? Because the Alien in Alien, is essentially a slasher movie villain. Now, one thing that's interesting about the Alien in this is that it is not from a race of makers. It is not an intelligent creature in the sense that it hasn't created this wonderful utopia. It hasn't created its own society which has solved all of mankind's ills. It is a primal creature which is only concerned with the survival of its race, much like an ant or a termite. You have an alien queen.
Yep.
Which then spawns out the egg.
It was at this point that the Facebook stream went down briefly. Dan talks about the idea of the alien being a xenomorph, and we rejoin this week's Rip Ticket review as we discuss Alien vs Predator.
The Alien vs Predator games tried to create a origin for the xenomorph, and the origin was that the Predator realized that there was very few prey that it could keep up with, and so it created its own, and it created the xenomorph as a means of giving it the ultimate challenge. And that the predators created the xenomorph, and that's why it has this acidic blood. That's why it can clamber along ceilings, and that's why it's such an expert hunter, because it was designed literally to give the predators a challenge. Now, obviously, that's not canon, but I gotta tell you, that's not a bad origin, is it?
That's not a bad origin story at all.
That was a pretty. I was like, oh, I hope they make that canon, because that was. You know, when I first came across that, it was like, ooh, now that's how you put two universes together. But it wasn't, and we got the Alien versus Predator movies, which we don't really want to speak about. Or
no, we don't speak of them. We don't speak of them about as much as my laptop just crapped out then on my end of the stream. So, Facebook viewers, apologies for the brief technical issues then, where we are back online now.
Wicked. And then we got Prometheus, didn't we?
Which was seen to be the big comeback, but the fans didn't enjoy it as much as the original films. No,
and then Alien Covenant, which was released at the same time as Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and then, like you correctly said, it got buried, which explains why I've never heard of it.
It came out around the same time that Guardians 2, and it was also around the time Wonder Woman came out, which also has a strong female character in it.
Yeah, what a time for Alien Covenant to come out. Two giant juggernauts.
And my local cinema didn't show because it was a construction site at the time.
Yeah, it had no chance at all.
It had no chance in hell.
So, Alien itself, the alien is very much designed around sexual imagery, and it is designed to make people feel very uncomfortable very, very quickly. Now, it is important to understand that sex and discomfort in movies and horror movies go hand in hand, because if you think about it, if you can make the idea of sex uncomfortable and somewhat horrific through the use of allegorical means in movies, you've kind of succeeded in horror, because of course, what's a more violating, emotional feeling in a movie for a viewer than watching something as pleasurable as sex being distorted? So, and take Dracula. He's a monster. He sneaks into women's bedrooms. He sucks their blood in their sleep and turns other people into vampires. That's crazy. Slasher movies as well. All the Frisky Friends are decapitated. The Virgin escapes. I mean, heck, It Follows, which was directed by Robert Mitchell, followed that trope to a T. Go watch it. It's a 2014 horror film made for horror fans.
Very highly recommended. It was on Film 4 a couple of weeks ago, if I remember rightly.
No way, that's crazy. But yeah, It Follows.
I'll quickly check.
But yeah, so the idea of sex being combined, and it goes back further than that as well. It goes back to our ancestral stories about incubi, succubi, creepy fairies that abducted young women. So it's a common trope, and we see it in Alien. Again, Dan O'Bannon explained he was going to attack the audience sexually. And O'Bannon and Ridley Scott were fans of a book called Necronomicon, which was Swiss artist H.R. Geiger's H.R. Geiger's love letter to Lovecraft. Try saying that 3 times when you're drunk. And the book is full of disturbing, very disturbing sexual imagery, and it was for that reason why H.R. Geiger was brought on board to give the Alien universe that incredibly eerie feel that starts immediately from the opening credits. Most space-themed science fiction movies have an orchestral opening, heroic. It's an adventure in space. It's about mankind triumphing. I can't say that word. Being victorious. Triumphing. Thank you. Over the alien. Let's have an orchestral score. Not seen in Alien. It's a very slow, creeping score, as the word alien is written in a very basic font, bit by bit comes into play over
it's almost like Jerry Goldsmith was given the brief to start amping up the tension from the minute that 20th Century Fox logo came off screen.
Exactly.
When I play, because I play a lot of board games in my spare time, we played the Alien Cosmic Encounters board game with a few friends of mine, and we had the soundtrack on in the background just to amp that tension up a little bit more. You can't not do Alien without that Jerry Goldsmith score. They're hand in hand with each other, and you do not get that with many films.
No, and and as the camera is creeping over the emptiness of space, the isolation, we see the egg-shaped planet come into view. The word alien is formed. There has never been a more terrifying sci-fi opening than that, and there never will be. And I am if anyone can create something along the vein like that isn't Alien related, I will tip my hat off to them, but it hasn't been done so far.
Not yet. And you are right that the brief showed that Fox wanted the tension. Sorry, the powers that be wanted the tension to start the moment that the Fox logo disappeared. Interestingly enough, the original one, before he got that instruction, was the heroic version. Wow.
And which was really crazy. And essentially, when it changed, everyone was a massive fan of it, but the person that made the music.
But then again, Jerry Goldsmith was quite critical of his own stuff anyway, so I'm not surprised in the slightest. He wanted it to be perfect.
So the movie starts off with everyone waking up. We get to know our characters, which I think I'm going to go as far as saying that most of these sort of movies that are based on the space station begin with people waking up from hypersleep or something along those lines. I think Alien was the first one to do that. I might be wrong. But it certainly was the one that made it the most popular. That sort of trope that if you're on a spaceship, you have to go into hypersleep in order to essentially suspended animation. And we're introduced to Dallas, captain of the Nostromo, the spaceship that everyone's on. Ripley, the warrant officer, played by Sigourney Weaver. Lambert, the navigator, Veronica Cartwright. You've got Brett, the engineering technician, Kane, the executive officer, played by the late but always great John Hurt, Ash, Ian Holm.
Talent. John Hurt, what a fantastic talent.
I know, right? Yaphet Kotto as Parker, Ian Holm, Ash, and then, of course, Helen Halston as the voice of Mother and Nostromo's computer. And by the way, if your ship is named the Nostromo, that's when you know you're in for a really bad time. Immediately, we're introduced to these characters. We immediately assume that Tom Skerritt, playing Dallas, captain of the Nostromo, is going to be the hero of the movie, because of course he's going to be the hero, isn't he? Look at him. He's tough. He's rugged. He has facial hair. And, he has got to obviously be the hero of the story. And they are awoken by the computer mother, who informs the crew of the Nostromo that there is a distress beacon that is, that has been picked up. Interesting thing about the computers that I didn't notice until it was pointed out for me. They were like, "What's missing from this computer, Daniel?" And I was looking at it going, I don't know. The computer has no mouse. Oh. It's so weird to think that in those days that nobody drew the thought, actually, is there going to be an interface where that people can interface with the computer? They can point and click. No, it's all done on keyboard command. How crazy is that, man? I didn't know. When I realized that, I was like, that's really interesting. And it's the same for most of those.
It's kind of surreal to see how Hollywood have evolved their presentation of computers over the years, because I was lucky enough to see 2001 on a big screen a couple of years back, and even then they were like, there's no interface with HAL, you just speak to it and he or she'll respond. And yet here's Alien with Mother, no mouse, probably a few keyboards here and there because gay typewriters were a thing at the time. To think over the 30 years how all that's evolved, and Hollywood have realised, yeah, maybe we've actually got to pay attention to technology a little bit more to make our science fiction a little bit more believable.
It's crazy, man. My mind was blown when I first read that, when I first realised that. Anyway, after much deliberation, the crew decides to go to this distress beacon, which is on the planet. They go down, and they find that the signal is coming from a derelict alien ship. Ripley deciphers part of the transmission, determining it to be a warning, but she cannot relay the information to those who have entered on the ship. Meanwhile, Kane discovers a large sort of chamber area containing hundreds of large egg-like objects. He breaks the cardinal rule about exploration and touches one of them. A creature springs out, breaks through its helmet, latches onto his face, and Kane is unconscious. They attempt to remove the creature from Kane's face, but they have to stop when they discover that the blood is extremely corrosive acid and melts through metal like hot knife through butter. It later detaches and it's found dead, and everyone's like, "Oh, excellent! It's all fine." They repair the ship, off they go. And Kane awakens with some memory loss. However, during a meal, he convulses and chokes, and an alien creature bursts from Kane's chest, killing him, and escapes into the ship. And yes, I am aware of that piece of trivia that Ridley Scott did not tell his crew that alien was going to burst from his chest. It is a trivia piece that everybody knows.
It's been on many pub quizzes over the years.
It's been on many pub quizzes. Ridley Scott did not let any of his crew know that was going to happen. And when there's a massive explosion of blood from the chest, and the crew are like, that's an actual natural reaction, because Ridley Scott was a bit of a that was mean.
Bit of an idiot. Yeah,
that was mean. But yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes, actually, and I think that's one of my favorite scenes of pure horror out there.
Yeah, it just gets it so perfect. So perfect.
It really is. So the creature just bolts out of there. The crew try to locate it with tracking devices. They try to hunt it down, but the creature it essentially hunts them one by one. It's pretty grim, to be honest. We won't go into any more of it, but yeah, it's down.
You all know what happens from there.
Yeah, it eventually comes down between Ripley and a cat versus the alien, and yeah, go watch it. It's a great movie, and it pretty much it is one of the first movies that showed a female lead. I want to actually say, I'm just going to double check this, but I am absolutely pretty sure that where are we? Released 1987. I think it is safe to say that the fact that it was a female protagonist was such a new thing. It did inspire Samus Aran in Metroid.
Oh, in Metroid.
In 1987,
Wow.
yeah. Indeed. Although it is important to understand that Samus Aran was not revealed as a woman unless you completed the
Until
game
quite
under a
later
certain
on,
amount
yeah.
of time. And even then, a lot of people didn't believe it. They were like, oh, no, it's just a thing. And then Metroid 2 came out and referred to Samus as a she. And it's like, oh, right, yeah, it is. Anyway, so Ridley Scott creates, the greatest science fiction ever. And Ripley is the greatest female ever living. Why? Because she is going up against a monster, which is essentially the perversion of sex in, like, horrific form. Let's start with the alien designs. Designed by H.R. Geiger, who, as we have gone on about, is who created the Necronomicon, and which was the book dedicated to Lovecraft. And I'm trying to find. I cannot remember the piece of artwork that it was based on, but in the original artwork that it was based on, you can see that the art looks very much like the alien, except there is a very clear penis shape on the back of its head because it's H.R. Geiger. So he transfers that over.
I can see pictures of it here, and I can see exactly what you mean. Wow.
Yeah. There you go. Interesting fact, H.R. Geiger also designed the Batman Forever Batmobile, but it was replaced with something
Thank God
else.
it was replaced. I wouldn't have liked to have seen that in Batman Forever. Hell no.
It was actually looks really interesting. But yeah, so they made several conceptual paintings of the alien. Now, everything to do with Alien is about the perversion of sex. Let's start off, and let's start off with the alien life cycle. Stage 1 is the egg. Now, from a female aspect, you can think of this as a point of conception, the female egg. But when the egg opens and the chest bursters come shooting out, you could also argue that that's an aspect of ejaculation. And this is the first encounter that anyone has with the alien. Whilst they're exploring the derelict ship that's giving off the distress signal, Kane comes upon these eggs. The egg was present in the opening title sequence of the Alien. It's the shape of the arc that the camera pans from left to right over what looks to be a planet. The planet is a gigantic egg shape, so it's already sort of like giving off those sort of vibes already. And the egg is where everything starts. And you can argue as well that the egg is where everything starts from life as well. The sperm is implanted into the egg, and that is what it creates the human, the fetus. In this case, on the conceptual level, the egg, it kind of establishes a common ground with our own human beings as an unfertilized as an unfertilized egg. It's crazy. There are, and so the egg, opens up, releases the face hugger, and which is stage 2 of the life cycle of the alien. Now, again, I have to warn people, we are going to go into some pretty deep territory here. So now's your chance to turn around. Here we go.
We'll give you a couple of seconds and time to get heavy.
Cool. So the face hugger latches on to the victim, in this case, Kane, and it forces a proboscis down his throat, where it implants the larvae of the alien, which then uses the human host. This is a pretty dark, this is a really dark implication of, and it was described by alien writer Dan O'Bannon as homosexual oral rape. That's mental. And it was meant to discomfort male viewers. as well. How that is mental. And then, of course, you've got the chest burster, which is a phallic creature. It bursts out. It looks deliberately like a phallic object, a penis. It bursts out of the chest in a bloody birth. From the female aspect, again, you've got a bloody birth from the abdomen. If you wanted to go deeper, you could argue that it is birth from rape. It's, very, very dark. And then it becomes the adult, where the drawers drip with secretions that melt. From the male, that's from the female aspect. You've got the sexual secretions, and then you've got the male aspect, which is the double phallic head. It kills by forcibly penetrating the victims with the double phallic head. And the thing about the alien as well, which by me I should have mentioned at the beginning, is that it has masculine elements and feminine elements to its appearance. It is not a hulking brute. It is a slender, black, almost oily creature that it doesn't jump out at you and then soak up loads of bullets. It clambers into the shadows, and it comes up from behind or in the shadows, and then bam, gets you that way. It has a very rubbery, latex-like appearance. It's very, very crazy. And the alien essentially murders every single person it can find through, by hunting it. And this is where Ripley comes in. This is why we know that Ripley is going to be the hero in this. Why? Well, it's quite simple. When they bring Kane back, they drop Kane in the cargo hold, and they're screaming at Ripley, and they're saying to Ripley, let us in, you've got to let us in. Kane is, he's in trouble. And what does Ripley do? She says, can't let you in because you've got an unknown contaminant and you have to stay outside for a certain amount of time because we cannot bring unknown contaminants into the ship. In other words, Ripley is the only one who is following the procedure. Everyone else is like, no, don't follow the procedure. Let us in. And it
has parallels to certain events.
Yeah.
That's the only joke we're going to make about what's happened in this podcast. Do not worry.
And it is that singular point, that one thing that Ripley does, which is where we clue in. Anyone who knows about their slasher film theory clues in and goes, the captain isn't the hero. Ripley is the hero, because she is the one person who is saying to follow procedure. And in the sense that it's kind of a subversion of the slasher films, where the killer kills people who they go against the morality of the time that the movie was made. In this, the killer, which is the alien, is going against the people who don't follow the procedure of the spaceship. So, pretty interesting. And of course, turns out Ripley was right. They open the door. I think it's Ash, isn't it, who opens the door, I think. And, Ripley's outraged. She's like, what are you doing? They eventually get him in sick bay. History is made. Mm-hmm. So you've got that. And as the movie goes on, Ripley realizes that she is going to be the only one to go up against this alien. She knows she can't fight it one-on-one. And, she has to basically use her brains to essentially find a way out of the situation, to basically escape the alien and figure out a way of essentially jettisoning it from the ship. Everything about this alien is phallic, from its jaws, its pharyngeal jaws, with its secretions, and its already phallic head, which is literally used to penetrate its victims to death. Additional fears are, anyone who has sweated a pregnancy scare or has silently crossed their fingers waiting for an STD test knows that this alien is a thing to be, this alien will give them a very uncomfortable feeling. The kills that we see from screen from the adult alien are all oppressively sexual in nature. Brett is penetrated to death by the phallus, and then as they drip with secretions. Again, we see the melding of the female and male sexual characteristics. The xenomorph kills Dallas off screen, so we don't see the particulars of his death. But we do see Parker killed in mostly the same way. Was quickly captured, head bite from the jaws, dead. This is also the suggested death of Lambert, the proxy, who is the proxy for the audience and the final victim. She freezes in terror for a full minute while Parker yells at her to move. The tail of the creature sneaks up between the legs of Lambert, and with the trajectory, the quick cut, and the off-screen screen posits the death, a penetrating death, which is not symbolic but literal. And if you are skeptical of this, which understandable because it is quite a dark viewing of this.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott himself describes the actions in accordance with this interpretation in the screenplay. He approaches Veronica Cartwright in Lambert with his tail, and we get the sense of something really hideous because you hear her off-camera emphasis added. So yeah, you see, it is entirely meant to be. So it only makes sense that Ridley is the only character to escape the Nostromo as it explodes. And we see that Ridley is essentially the ultimate, Ridley is the ultimate female hero in all of this. Why? Because much like slasher movies, she wants to follow procedure. She is essentially going up against this creature, and she has to use her brains in order to get away from it. She doesn't think about going one-on-one with it. She decides to initiate the self-destruct sequence and basically trap the alien on board. Now, the movie was meant to end in there, but I do believe that Ridley Scott pushed for a fourth act where Ridley is about to enter into hypersleep. She discovers that the alien has managed to get on board, having wedged itself into a narrow space. So she has to put a spacesuit on and flush the creature out. And then Ridley opens up an airlock door, blowing the creature into space. And that's when Ridley shoots it with a grappling hook. And Ridley has to end up jettisoning the alien. When it tries to grab onto the engine exhaust, Ripley fires the engines, blasting the creature away. To me, that scene was unneeded. I think that essentially, if the alien ended, as it did with Ridley, barely escaping the Nostromo and going into hypersleep, I think it would have made a better movie. I think having the aliens survive by jumping on the ship kind of diminishes the movie somewhat, but it's it didn't do too badly in that sense. It could have gone a lot worse. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, that's pretty much Ripley, and the reason why I think she's one of the ultimate villains. The ultimate female hero.
The ultimate, yeah.
Essentially, she is going up against a creature which, and she has to win by essentially following procedure and using her brains against a creature which is essentially sexual violence personified. And yeah, Alien did very, very well. It did a number of sequels. Do you want to talk about those?
Some were bad. Yeah, some were good, some were bad. So, of course, as you quite rightly mentioned, Alien went on to become one of the big franchises for Fox in the 80s, the 90s, died a little bit in the 2000s with Alien vs. Predator. We do not speak of that. But, of course, Ridley Scott has been quite protective of what has arguably become his baby. The most recent addition to the franchise was, of course, in 2017, Alien Covenant. As we mentioned at the top of this podcast, it got buried in the shuffle amongst other blockbusters, but arguably the sequel, Aliens, which James Cameron had a bit of involvement in, went down in infamy as one of the greatest sequels ever made, from what I understand.
Yes, Aliens was the second installment. It grossed $180 million worldwide. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Empire magazine voted it the greatest film sequel of all time. It was it was a little more actiony than the Alien, the previous movie, I thought. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was directed by James Cameron, who is much more of an action-orientated director. Whereas Ridley Scott, you can argue, it takes his time and builds up the tension, but it's still pretty good. Don't get me wrong. It is definitely the second best out of the Aliens movies. The first, obviously, being Alien. I think, but again, this is where you see Ripley in all her action as she evolves essentially from a slasher film survivor to an action hero. So,
plus, hot and fresh science fact just in, tomorrow is the anniversary of the first Alien film coming out in America. May 25th, 1979 is when it came out in America, so we are literally doing this podcast at the best possible time, yeah.
Alien premiered May the 25th. It is as well. Oh my gosh. We could not have picked that. Oh my word.
I think taking a week off last week has helped us more than we ever thought.
I know. Oh my word. But yeah.
This is gonna be our highest performing episode ever.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. I'm really chuffed with that. That's actually made me really, really chuffed.
Other facts here, of course, it got the R rating in America, unsurprisingly. However, the BBFC very nearly gave this film a AA certificate, which is 14 and over. They went and gave it the X eventually, at the request of Fox. They were like, if you give an AA, it would make it a little bit harder to tell this is a horror movie. So it is a 15 certificate nowadays, though.
Here's an interesting one as well. Screenwriter Ron Shusett describes in an interview in the documentary, Dan O'Bannon, puts his finger on the problem. What has to happen next is the creature has to get on the ship in an interesting way. I have no idea how, but if we could solve that, if it can't be that it just snuck in, then I think the whole movie will come into place. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I said, Dan, I think I have an idea. The alien screws one of them. It jumps on his face and plants its seed. And Dan says, oh my God, we've got it. We've got the whole movie. So that is much more evidence that there is a lot of sexual themes happening in Alien. And again, why it makes sense that Ripley is essentially the hero. She's essentially fighting a sexual predator alien. Very feminist.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that? Ridley Scott is a feminist, isn't he? If I remember rightly.
I think he is. I'm not too sure about it, but I think he might be.
Yeah, I know that he's I'm not going to come out and say that he 100% is, but yeah, another sort of example there of how forward thinking essentially the crew was in creating this absolute genius and yet terrifying film in which the poster said, "In space, no one can hear you scream." And that's pretty much all you need to know about how that is such a terrifying line. In space, no one can hear you scream.
It was quite rightly on all of the posters. Back in 2014, for the 35th anniversary, of course, they reissued the director's cut into cinemas. I remember walking past and I seen the poster, Alien 35th anniversary, showing at this cinema. I was like, yes, you know it's a classic film when you look at the poster and you feel terrified.
Now, critical reaction to the film initially was a bit of a mixed bag. Some critics that were not favourable to science fiction gave positive reviews, and others were not. People like Variety, Sight and Sound, Vincent Cambry and Leonard Moulton, the reviewer, were mixed or negative. But for example, a review by Time Out at the time said the film was an empty bag of tricks whose production values and expensive trickery cannot disguise imaginative poverty. Blasphemy. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert were critical of Alien.
Siskel and Ebert were critical?
Well, Ebert called it basically an intergalactic haunted house thriller set inside a spaceship.
Wow.
And they said it was they both, and one of the several science fiction pictures that were real disappointments compared to Star Wars.
Oh.
Yeah. But Ebert later would reverse on that. He gave his movie 4 stars on his great movie list, and he said Ridley Scott's 1979 movie is a great original. Siskel would go on to give the film 3 out of 4 stars in his original print review, and he would call it an accomplished piece of scary entertainment. So,
at least they changed their tune.
But he said he listed upon the film's disappointments. For me, the final shape of the alien was the least scary of its forms, which I get. If you look at the alien without the shadows, it does look a bit more weird than scary. But in the shadows, whew, that thing's terrifying.
Just proof that lighting is everything when you're making a horror film. Just that simple bit of shadow can be the difference between an audience losing their minds and an audience laughing at how awful it looks.
And one of the things that many reviewers and many critics say about Alien is that they claim that it is a part of the genre known as rape movies, such as I Spit on Your Grave, which I kind of disagree with, because yes, although there are sexual overtones and reproduction, and themes about reproduction by non-consensual means, and all of this happening to like a man, normally the idea of a rape movie is to break down the female lead and then build them back up by murdering, the perpetrators. This doesn't happen. Instead, it's about playing on men's fear and misunderstanding of pregnancy and childbirth. And it's I wouldn't argue that it is a rape movie per se. I think it has those themes, but I think it's more about fighting back against said non-consensual means of reproduction. So you could kind of call it, I guess, the anti-rape movie, I guess.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Again, this is technically a Disney movie now, because the Fox
Oh
deal.
my word. That's a Disney ride you don't want Mickey Mouse narrating.
No.
But yeah. But it's I could go on about this movie all day, but I'm not. I end this by saying, please watch the movie. It is brilliant. Even to this day, people can learn about how to make a brilliant science fiction horror movie just by watching this. It is fantastic. I have the uttermost praise for this movie. It is one of my top favourite movies. Please watch it in a dark room with the sound turned up.
Oh, yes.
Thus,
I'm just doing the usual check for any of the streaming services now. It doesn't look like it's available on any streaming services, but it does say here Amazon have got it, all good DVD outlets have got it, and if anything, get the whole set. Get the whole set, do the whole franchise in one night, and you can laugh at how bad 3 and 4 are. You can watch Prometheus and think, oh God, that was a disappointment. And then you can watch Covenant and think, yeah, I'm glad I missed this in cinemas because it's not as good as the originals. But 1 and 2 are arguably the defining moments for science fiction in the 80s. It set the standard. It set a lot of tropes that we've come to know. And of course, as we've discussed this whole podcast, it gave us the first proper female hero in a movie of its kind, something which studios have done a lot more since then. If this movie hadn't been made in 1979, we wouldn't have people like Gal Gadot popping up as Wonder Woman. We wouldn't be getting Black Widow in October.
Yeah.
This film has had a big impact.
With most female protagonists nowadays, and I do not include Wonder Woman or Black Widow in this, by the way, but most female protagonists, it's forced down our throats that they are women, and that is why they are a hero. It's not because of any unique attributes that they possess. It's the fact that they are women, hear me roar, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't like the Captain Marvel movie. Because
I remember we discussed a lot about Captain Marvel when we did a radio show together.
Yeah, because the Captain Marvel, it was essentially Iron Woman, hear me roar, and it erased practically anything good about her personality. And that's why Wonder Woman was brilliant, because it was never shoved down our throat that she was a woman. We were never reminded every 5 minutes. She was a hero because she had these attributes that are heroic, and she happened to be a woman. And that's what happens in Alien. Ripley has these heroic attributes. She's brave in the face of danger. She does all this crazy stuff. It just so happens that she's a woman, which is really cool. And we will end this episode on a rather lovely little fact for you, that this has been adapted into a school play.
I know, I found that fact when I was doing my research earlier today, and I was like, it's become a school play. I know they've wanted to do a lot of Ridley Scott movies in the past, like Gladiator was mentioned as well, but do tell more.
Oh, it happened in 2019 at North Bergen High School in New Jersey. They adapted the film into a play. It had no budget, and props and sets were developed from recycled toys and other items. It was put on social media. Ridley Scott wrote a letter of congratulations to the students, where he wrote, "My hat comes off to all of you for your creativity, imagination, and determination." And he recommended that they consider an adaptation of his film Gladiator for the next stage production. And
that would be amazing.
Ridley Scott donated to the school to put on an encore performance, and Sigourney Weaver was in attendance. She got on the stage before the performance to congratulate the cast and crew for their creativity. How amazing is that? Got pretty dark there in this episode, because it has to be. But we'll end it on a nice note.
We will, yeah, that is a very nice note to end it on. I mean, I've had to get used to seeing Ridley Scott before every movie I see, because they've put him in the new View pre-movie ident, directed by his son Jake. His son's a director as well.
Yeah.
But we are coming up on the end for this week's Rip Ticket Review. Let's talk about what we're doing next week. Because for the first time... next week? Well, we kind of discussed it last time we were together. We've done Alien now. For the first time, I get creative reins. We're going from a film about sci-fi to a TV series about sci-fi. In 1999, Edgar Wright made a TV series called Spaced, and it was arguably the crux for 3 of the greatest comedy movies ever released. Films that are on ITV2 every single weekend. Those films are, of course, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. Next week, having binged the entire first series of Spaced, I'm going to go in depth as to how one Channel 4 programme resulted in 3 of the strongest British comedies of all time. So we're looking at Spaced next week.
I look forward to you taking the reins on this. So I've been taking the reins quite a lot. I think it's about time we give some to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you've been busy working on 2 episodes of the journal back to back. I'm here at TheJackSmit Adventure's been hectic at the office lately. But that is next week from 3 p.m. Here on Facebook and on the podcast feeds. A huge apologies to the live viewers as well for the brief outage we had about 10 past 3. We've got it all rectified. It should sound pretty seamless on the podcast recording of this because I'm going to work some post-production magic. But that is it for this week's Rip Ticket Review. It's been a dark but a good one today.
I've enjoyed talking about it, but like you say, it is quite dark subject. But yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully people will still enjoy it, and it shines a new light on the movie.
Yeah, failing that, we've got quite a big archive now. We've got episodes about how Uwe Boll didn't quite perfect the video game movie. We've done episodes on The Crow. We've done an episode on The Room, and we were talking off air. There's an update to the Tommy Wiseau story. I seem to hear that there's a lawsuit that he has just lost.
Tommy Wiseau unfortunately has, well, no, not unfortunately, I don't know why I said that. Tommy Wiseau has lost a lawsuit in The Room. He's been ordered to pay $750,000 to Canadian filmmakers as a result of an unauthorized documentary about his 2003 cult classic, The Room. Tommy Wiseau tried to block the release of A Room Full of Spoons 3 years ago by filing an injunction against the Canadians who made it, accusing them of copyright infringement and invasion of privacy. The copyright infringement comes from using parts of his work without permission, even though that it was well within the rights of their use. And the invasion of privacy is talking about where he's come from, because Tommy Wiseau, as we know, likes to cultivate an air of mystery, even though the judge pointed out that they actually found out where he's from public records and that anyone could have done it. And as a result, the arguments were called outrageous. And basically he just got absolutely demolished. Yeah. So
not good to be Tommy Wiseau right now, is it?
Yep, it's not at the moment. It's a real shame, because this is not the first time that Tommy Wiseau has misunderstood copyright laws. You can't block someone from using your work for reasons that you don't like if they have fair usage to it, okay? If you don't like the documentary, Tommy, I have a really great idea. It's really simple, and it doesn't cost you $750,000. Goes a little site like this. Don't watch it. Don't watch it. Ignore it. Disown it. Just say in your crazy voice, I've got nothing to do with it, and move on. You maybe send it, Judge Shabas, who was the one who slammed down the judgment, said, why so maybe sensitive about this information that is about his past, because he cultivated an aura of mystery around it, but disclosure of these facts is not, objectively speaking, something which can be described as quote unquote highly offensive. No, it's correct. Sorry, it's correct. So yeah, for more information, go on to YouTube, search it something, I don't know.
We've got to address it on Talking Smit About Film.
Come on, I know, right? Copyright fair use 2, Tommy Wiseau 0. Yeah. And of course, Copyright 2 went off to the playoffs to face Manchester United for the cup. And we end that, ladies and gentlemen, of this episode of the Rip Ticket Show. Thank you very much for tuning in. I recommend that after
that was the Rip Ticket review.
Yep, of the Rip Ticket review. We recommend going out watching some episodes, some videos of puppies and baby elephants to make you feel better after this one. But ho-hum, it's horror. Thanks very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. My name's been Daniel Carver.
I've been Jack Smith. This has been the Rip Ticket Review. I'll be back on Thursday with this week's Talking Smit About Film. Until then, we will see you at the movies. Take it easy. Debrief after that podcast, and we'll see you next week. Good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.